So welcome you all to the Rainmaking at Okanagan event in 2021. My name is Eric Lee, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Management of the UBC Okanagan campus. First of all, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the UBC Okanagan campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Sioux Okanagan Nation. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places, near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of these lands. Today, the Socio-Economic Change Lab at UBC is partnering with the Good City Foundation in Asia and inviting you to join us and with our speakers to share our experience and innovative thoughts to address issues such as socio-economic change, community development and resilience, future skills training through higher education. I would like to invite my partners, MC, so Sherman from the Good City Foundations, to share some background of the Rainmaking series. Sherman, please join us.
Thank you so much, Professor Eric, and thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. This is Shalman from Good City Foundation. I'd like to give a brief idea about the Good City Foundation. We are a foundation based out of Hong Kong. The purpose of the foundation is to facilitate the growth of emerging cities across the world, understand what the cities have to offer, find out the top-notch startups from all the cities and help them to expand in new markets, help them with capacity building and advisory support, and impact investment and so on. As of now, we have been very active in East Asia and Southeast Asia with our programs and events and other activities. During the pandemic, we have seen a huge change in the way we work, in the way the government is coming up with new policies, how entrepreneurs are pivoting their businesses and so on. In the whole process, technology has played an important role. So the purpose of this Rainmaking series, it's a series of dialogue followed by Tech for Good Cities roadshow across the world, in Asia and in Africa and now in North America, to understand how the governments are coming up with new policies to tackle the COVID issue, how the entrepreneurs are pivoting their business, how technology is helping to tackle some of the most wicked problems in the world and going for the Great Reset. And that's the purpose of the Rainmaking series. It's a very special day for us because this is the very first footprint of Good City Foundation in Canada, and not just in Canada, also in entire North America, together with Change Lab at UBC and the partners there. So that's my heartiest gratitude to everyone for being here and being part of this special day. I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, and we will share more about the foundation and the upcoming roadshow afterwards. Thank you so much, Professor Eric.
Well, thank you, Sherman, for sharing for that. So our two evening events will include a panel discussions and also a set of roadshows tomorrow featuring some amazing Okanagan enterprises. Before we start our panel discussions, I would like to invite Dr. Roger Sugden, the Dean of the Faculty of Management, to share some opening remarks with our participants. So Dr. Sugden, please kindly join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. As Eric said, my name is Roger Sugden. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Management. And I work alongside Eric in the Socio-Economic Change Laboratory at UBC's Okanagan campus, together actually with some of the others who will be contributing to the discussions over the next couple of days. It's my huge pleasure to make a few opening remarks, and I'd like to begin by saying how much we appreciate the opportunity to work with the Good City Foundation and all of the other partners that have made the activities during the course this evening and tomorrow evening possible. It's absolutely vital, I think, to have opportunities to co-explore and think about the future development of cities and regions. And the most effective way to do that is through vibrant collaborations such as this. Regions and cities around the world are facing major societal challenges: climate change, health insecurities, lack of equity, diversity, inclusion. No news in that, as it were. But actually, although the challenges are in some sense well known, at least at headline levels, ways of addressing the challenges aren't exactly falling off the trees. And the sorts of challenges there that I've mentioned are for sure as pressing in the Okanagan as elsewhere. And for example, in this region, they range from concerns about water use in agriculture and in recreational settings, through to ongoing marginalization and othering of significant numbers of people, both in Kelowna and in the region more widely. And universities have a really important role to play, I think, when it comes to reflecting about those challenges and about how to develop on what basis and for whose benefit. Partly that's the case in universities because of the capacities in the universities to undertake forms of robust analysis. And that analysis can help inform reflection and help stimulate reflection. And partly it's because universities, I think, have enormous capacity to bring people together in collaborative inquiry. And both of those, the robust analysis and the collaborative inquiry, are for sure evident in the activities this evening and tomorrow. The idea, of course, is that by working together in these ways, we can learn from and with each other, contributing to ongoing conversations and reimagining our economic development futures. So I really look forward to the panels, this panel this evening, and for the activities as well tomorrow evening, and really like to thank sincerely all of the contributors to the two evenings events for giving us this opportunity to share and think and explore together. So thanks very much, and I'm going to go and enjoy all of this now. Eric, back to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sugden, for that. So this evening, we are very fortunate to have three outstanding community leaders, Dr. Ananya Mukherjee, Provost and Vice President Academic of the UBC Okanagan campus, Ms. Krishna Manori, the Manager of the Central Okanagan Economics Development Commission, and Mr. David Knapp, Executive Directors of the Central Okanagan Foundations, joining us here to share their views on social and economic change in the Okanagan region. So the format of today's panel discussions will follow what I call the fireside style of sharing. So we don't have any formal presentations. So we would like to kind of start with some general topics on socio-economic changes in the Okanagan values. And then we would like to invite you, our attendees and participants, to raise some questions through our Q&A functions of the feature in our Zoom platform to share your questions or the comment with our panelists. Sherman and I will moderate our Q&A session in the second half of our panel discussions. So without further ado, I would like to invite our panelists, Ananya, Krista, and David, to unmute yourselves, or at least to turn on your videos to joining us. And then I will probably start the conversation. Well, thank you so much again. So maybe the first topic would be some general discussions. So would you mind sharing what your organizations are doing, practicing, and learning in the Okanagan values in the past years that you are super proud of, and what you would like to share with us? Maybe we start from Krishna. So if you want to share your experience with the Central Okanagan Economic Development Commission, please, Krishna.
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you for including us today. The Central Okanagan Economic Development Commission is a function of the regional government, and our mandate is to foster a healthy regional economy by supporting local businesses and encouraging appropriate new business investment in the region. And what that means is a lot of different things. So part of it is promoting the region and all we have to offer globally, nationally, provincially. But most of our work is in supporting local businesses, whether that be connecting businesses to resources or workforce or a number of different programs and activities. And what I'm proud of, I like that you asked that question, is really how the region has grown and changed and provided opportunities for people to live and work here. I'm a graduate of UBC Okanagan. I originally moved here to go to UBC Okanagan, and when I graduated at that time, it was very difficult, or I perceived it to be very difficult to stay in the region and build a career here. I really wanted to, so I made it happen. And I'm proud of the way that that has changed over the past, say, 10, 15 years. In what was previously known as, perhaps a retirement or tourism destination. What we always say is that government doesn't create jobs, entrepreneurs create jobs, and our role is to foster an environment that helps entrepreneurs to do that. And I think that we've done a pretty good job of that over the past 5 or 10 years, definitely. And the way that we do that is by helping to create connections in the community, to connect companies to each other, to workforce, to resources and organizations. And so that would be what I would be most proud of, is being that community connector.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for your sharing. Maybe I would like to invite Ananias. So do you want to share your experience with the UBC here with us? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Eric, for having me and for organizing this very interesting event. Let me first start with the very tragic news that we received this week of the finding of the burial site of 215 Indigenous children in a region called Kamloops, not too far from here. And we are grief-stricken. It is hard to deal with news like that. But as many of our Indigenous colleagues are saying, that grief and heartbreak is not enough. It must stimulate some action. And so we hope that, this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about in this campus, that we really move forward seriously with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. So you asked what I'm proud of. Of course, we're proud, first of all, of being UBC, a research institution, where we have great faculty and great students doing the wonderful work of research and teaching. But this campus was also founded in partnership with our local Indigenous communities, the Okanagan Nation Alliance. And while there is a lot more to do and there is a lot to learn, but we do take very seriously the relationship with the Indigenous partners and the local region. And we have a very large number of faculty, students, and staff who are working on different ways of engaging with our Indigenous partners. And so in terms of growth, I can talk about it a little bit later, but as you know that we are very proud of the Outlook 2040, which is a 20-year vision of the university, of the campus that we have embraced. And we look forward to working with all of you towards realizing that a 2040 vision of a research-intensive, inclusive, collaborative university.
Thank you so much, Ananias, for your sharing for that. So maybe now I just would like to invite David. Can you share some experience with the Central Okanagan Foundation? Please, David.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks, everybody. Welcome. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to share this time with you. So yeah, David from the Central Okanagan Foundation, and I'm reflecting on the organization that I represent and in the community. We are a community foundation. It's inherent in everything that we do. So community comes up an awful lot, including the opportunity to speak to you today. We were founded by some visionary people that had their roots in the Okanagan 44 years ago. A couple of families who got together with a vision to create an endowment that would fund charities, charitable organizations, important causes in the region in perpetuity. And I'm proud to say that initial $80,000 commitment is now just nudging $35 million And we've just surpassed $22 million of funding into the community in that time. So I'm super proud of that. I'm certainly standing on the shoulders of many, many people who have gone before. We have a small team, but we have an army of volunteers and committee members and board members who are so passionate about making this community, giving them the support that they need. And I suppose that what we really do, and I'll pick up on something that Krista mentioned, is that, you know, we connect community to causes, or it's in our vision statement, empowering generations to give. So I think that, you know, our organization really helps bridge the gap between people who have a passion for making this place just a little bit better, leaving it a little bit better than the way they found it, and it's our job to help them connect to those causes that resonate deeply with them, and also tell them what you know, perhaps provide opportunities that they weren't aware of. And that would be our role. So that's a little bit about the Community Foundation. Back to you, Eric.
Well, thank you, David, for that. And thank you, our panelists, for sharing this wonderful. So again, many of you really touch on the changes, in particular is talking about the growth. And then, so my second topic with like your sharing is about the growth. So thinking about, like, we have some key sectors like the higher educations, and Krista, you talk about the tourism industries is changing dramatically for that. So maybe you want to talk about, Krista, for that, how the Central Okanagan Economic and Development Commissions keep tracking the growth of the market and key sectors in the Okanagan Valley. Do you mind to sharing some maybe industry information with us here?
Certainly. So I mentioned earlier that the region has traditionally been often thought of as a mecca for agriculture, tourism, retirement. You know, we always say peaches and beaches. But over the last few decades, but certainly the last 5 to 10 years, we've definitely seen a shift. In 2019, the Central Okanagan Economic Development Commission undertook a significant strategic planning exercise for the next 5 years. And within that, we identified 5 sectors in focus. And these are sectors that are both or either historically important to the region, are poised for growth within the sector and ripe for innovation as well. And then also have a benefit to the region as a whole by, say, creating opportunities in the supply chain for other companies, creating well-paying jobs in the region, and supporting small businesses. And so the sectors that we identified are manufacturing and aerospace, agriculture and viticulture, ICT, information communications technology, animation, film, digital media, and health. And so those are sectors that, as I mentioned, are either poised for growth or have experienced significant growth or are historically important in the region. And so a lot of people don't realize that many of those sectors are operating locally, particularly as many of them don't have local customers. So, you know, for example, there's 700 tech companies in the region or over 700 tech companies in the region with the economic impact of over 1.67 billion annually several years ago. 18% of BC's aerospace companies operate out of the Central Okanagan. We have over 182 wineries and 72 other beverage manufacturers. And some of these companies are solving big problems worldwide. You know, for example, we have Two Hat Security, which I know has significant partnership with UBC Okanagan through the MyTax program. And they are tackling challenges of cyberbullying in online communities in some of the leading companies throughout the world. We have Skytrax Systems, who is, I believe, on the call today and part of the roadshow tomorrow. So I'll leave it to them to tell you a little bit more about what they do, but is a leader in data solutions for aviation. We have world leaders in water park equipment and game changers in reducing plastic waste, worldwide, operating out of the region. And so that's pretty exciting for us to see. And it's a story that we're really trying to get better about sharing, not just with audiences outside of the region, but with local audiences as well, to build that recognition and pride in our local industries.
Thank you, Kristen, for that. Again, just now is really our pleasure to have like Skytrax is part of our Rosos Tomorrows, is one of the industry leaders. And thank you, Kristen, for sharing all the information about how the sectors is growing and also changing. I think we just want to tell, I think, some wonderful stories happening in the Okanagan regions. And maybe now I would like to kind of invite Anaya. I know that the UBC Okanagan campus is a relatively young campus in Canada, so we just still teenagers at this moment. So would you mind sharing your views on how higher education in particular, especially a research-intensive university, contributes to the socio-economic development of regions like the Okanagan Valley?
Mm-hmm. So I think the contribution, we can talk about the contribution, but if we can actually collaborate systematically. When I was listening to Krista talking about the areas of growth like digital media, technology, health, data, these are exactly the areas in which our programs are growing, and our demand for students demand are growing for new programs. And some of the programs that we are developing are in these areas. We also have a plan for interdisciplinary work, which is really focused on not in individual disciplines, but in looking at these issues like health or media or art, all of this in an interdisciplinary way. So I do, in terms of the university's just presence in Kelowna, I just wanted to paint a picture and see, how we could really systematically collaborate. So if you look at where the university is today in Kelowna, we can start from the south, where there is the Woodhaven Eco-Cultural Center, which is a little bit south of Mission. Then we have our medical campus, which is in the General Hospital. Then we have the Innovation Center. We're trying to build a major downtown presence. Then we have our main campus, and now we are proceeding to the slightly north of campus for an innovation district, which will have a co-location of engineering and the arts. And in the downtown presence that we are thinking, it will have a wine lab. Those are the kinds of things we're hoping for. Public art, major health-related public-facing programs. So throughout the city, when I was preparing for this, Eric, this is the first thing I saw, that throughout the city now, we have a presence of the university, and it can grow in all of these areas. So I think it's a wonderful moment for us to think how we can systematically make ourselves a learning city, a knowledge city, or whatever we want to think of, because there is the presence of the university, a research university, throughout the city, and we have the kind of industry that Krista mentioned. So a lot to work with here. And so in terms of growth, we are looking to grow students, but not necessarily just the numbers. It would be different kinds of programs, graduate students, research. That's where we envisage a lot of growth, and in all these kinds of new areas that we talked about, like health, technology, data, interdisciplinary work, regional development, like the Socio-Economic Change Lab is doing. So a very exciting moment in terms of a collaboration.
Well, thank you, Anaya, for that. Again, it's a collaboration, and also kind of is really tied into what would be the role of higher education in the cities. And like what you just mentioned, for that, and UBC, the campus, and also our locations for that is not just like in a place, but actually is part of the city landscape. For that, I think it's very important to talk about the integrations, to talk about the collaboration. So when we talk about community for that, I think, David, you are the next one to kind of really sharing what the great things, the Central Okanagan Foundation, like what you just mentioned, and then so now you are kind of like supporting the community through the $22 million funding for that. Can you tell us a little bit more some of the trends and key activities you witnessed in the pre-pandemic world, as well as during the pandemic, especially in the last 15 months in the Okanagan region?
Yes, thanks, Eric. It's certainly been an interesting time, and you know, to reiterate that our role is to provide funding for not-for-profits within the Central Okanagan, and so obviously pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, the need increased, and the available donations or revenue streams for not-for-profits was interrupted. If you think about an arts organization that typically runs a number of concerts throughout the year and for their donors and raises significant funding to run their operations and to pay important wages and such, those things just didn't happen. But the need, I guess, again, the need was there and increased. So for us as a foundation, it was go time and an important time to ensure that we were there to continue the funding uninterrupted. You know, despite you know, the market volatility, extreme market volatility of March, April, May of last year, and to have that foundation in good shape and making sure that again those funds were uninterrupted. Looking forward, you know, we're optimistic, of course, and we hope that that especially arts organizations who were affected, I mean, every organization will be able to rebound, and there'll be a pent-up demand for arts and concerts, and everybody will be buying season tickets for everything. That's my hope, and that would be a great way to emerge from this. But you know, Eric, I wanted to share a little bit about some of the other trends that we're seeing that relate specifically to, you know, perhaps you know, the folks attending UBCO right now. I haven't attended university for some time, although I'm just about to go back for something different. But you know, millennials are you know, inspirational in so many ways. You know, our typical donors are primarily baby boomers and Gen Xers, those who currently have, you know, the big portion of the wealth. Millennials have a small piece of that wealth at the moment, but that will change. But what's really interesting to me is that 76% of those millennials consider impact when they're investing, and only 29% of baby boomers consider impact when investing. So this bodes well for the kinds of things that we're looking to do. And then similarly, 64% of millennials make actual investments based on corporate values, and only 42% of baby boomers do that. So I think that the outlook is really rosy. I think where we are starting to see those trends is that we're having different types of conversations with donors and investors, and it's less a siloed conversation about charitable giving or philanthropy. It's becoming more intertwined and absolutely a part of the entire piece of working and supporting and investing and giving. And that is exciting times, I think, for us. And this will keep us, you know, moving forward and staying relevant to the past. Faithful to the past, but also relevant to the future, as Michael Eisner says. Over to you, Eric.
Well, thank you, David, for this wonderful sharing for that. So you touch on the millennials, kind of like the investments, kind of like mindsets for that is really focused on the impact. It's really tied naturally to my next topics I would like you all to share. So it's about the talents. So think about like in the Okanagan regions for that, we are not as big as Toronto in Ontario or Vancouver in the coast for that. So, but for emerging regions like the Okanagan Valley, we constantly experience some challenge related to talent recruitment and retentions. So we're very lucky we have Priscilla stay here with us for that. But I'm pretty sure both organizations you're working for, and then so it's all experience this kind of a recruitment and retention cycle for that. I wonder whether you can share some of your views about the future of education or youth developments and also future work in the Okanagan Valley. So since you touch on the community and also the millennials, or that maybe David, I would like to invite you back to share your opinions about this.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if I have many answers for you, but I certainly have a few opinions that I can share. You know, when we talk about the not-for-profit sector, it's a broad sector within our economy, and there's some incredible people who are superbly passionate about the causes and the organizations that they work for. I'll relay a conversation that I had with a not-for-profit leader, and unfortunately, it's not all rosy. It's very hard for not-for-profits, certainly the ones that have shared this with me. There's pressure to keep employees when there are a lot of options elsewhere. Funding is sometimes drives that challenge to make sure that there's consistent funding, and it probably opens up the door for a debate on how the not-for-profit sector is governed in terms of very short-term funding, and as opposed to being able to raise their own capital. It is what it is, but it creates a little bit of a follow-on effect with talent recruitment, certainly retention, when people are also looking at to live in a place like the Okanagan, which has experienced incredible real estate growth, and it's becoming a little less affordable than perhaps we would like it. So I think that's probably the only thing that I can relate to you, Eric, in terms of trends. It is challenging to retain great people in the not-for-profit sector. They're superbly passionate, but of course, there's that tension between, I want to do this, but I have this opportunity to perhaps make a little bit more in a different sector, and maybe that is where I need to go. So I'd love to see us close that gap somehow if possible.
Thank you, David, for that. When we talk about closing the gaps at that, and now you're as the provost of UBCO for that. And again, you mentioned the 2040s kind of visions for that. I think one of the important key indicators is talk about we are doubling our campus, the size from 10,000 students to like 25,000 students for that. So it's really kind of a tap into what David is talking about, like the gaps and also the challenges for that. Maybe you can share a little bit from the UBC perspective and how you see like the talent recruitment and retentions.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, attracting student and faculty, I think we are still in a good position to do that. We are attracting talent, but then the question is retaining, right? And that's where I think that if we can, if the collaborations are possible, we are attracting people who are mostly in some kind of a knowledge sector. That's what the university attracts, in some kind of research sector. So if we can build a couple of really unique sort of research areas, research, clusters is a term that's often used in terms of regional development, but a kind of research-focused areas, I think that's what will retain people through a community. Because I find, when, for example, there are couples who would like to move and raise a family, and even though, yes, real estate is not kind anymore, but still as a place to start, it often is a very good opportunity, but then people worry about what the future would be. So if there was a growth path in terms of knowledge sectors, knowledge-based sectors, I think that would be great. And for students also, there is a model which is we refer to as anchor institutions, and that has different connotations. But if the university can become an anchor institution, bringing together nonprofits, knowledge sectors, research clusters, and so that the students, graduate and undergraduate, become involved in a regional development the dynamics of regional development is what they get engaged in at the beginning, then I would think, just like Krista as an example, they would stay, right? And our students do want to stay. It's a more getting the right employment, but there is a real attraction to continue to stay. So I think if we make that priority, and build a kind of really strong collaborative network, let's say in areas like health and so on, then I think we would be able to retain talent in a more proactive way.
Thank you so much, Anna, yes, for that. You're absolutely right, but I think we have to, collaboration and institutionally really building the platform to keep the talents in the values. I think it's really kind of a go to Chris that earlier today, you're also pulling out some very interesting statistics. We have like 700 or over 700 of startup company in the Okanagan regions, which is thinking about like we only have a little bit close to 200,000 populations in the radios. And then so the per capita size is amazing. And Kelowna, our core cities, and then so it's also one of the kind of most entrepreneurial cities a couple of years ago in Canada with that. It really kind of featuring something. So when we talk about the talent recruitment and retentions, maybe you can articulate a little bit more maybe on the entrepreneurships like opportunity, maybe time back to David's and also Anania's is talk about like the collaborations and community investments components with that. So would you mind to join us and share some of your insights?
Yeah, there's so much to talk about there. So I'm picking up on things that David and Ananya said, and I don't want to lose those thoughts. But prior to the pandemic, when we go out and visit with companies, 41% of them over the past 3 or 4 years have said that attracting and retaining talent is their biggest challenge to growth. And 1 year out from the height of the pandemic and still very much in the pandemic now, that really hasn't changed. A year ago, if you had have asked me, I might not have expected that. But our regional labor market information shows that, of course, this is not true. It's not been even across all sectors, but overall, we have recouped all of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic and then some, and have one of the lowest unemployment rates in Canada consistently month over month. So certainly remains a major challenge, especially as a smaller region with some of these industries that are maturing. And I think that was brought up earlier when you talked specifically about you have a family moving here. One may be recruited to UBCO or another company. Most of the time, their partner is also a highly skilled knowledge worker as well. So how can we, if we don't have opportunities for both in the region, then we lose both of those individuals. And so that's an area that the COEDC has played a role in the past and still does in helping to connect those, what we would call trailing partners, to opportunities in the region. And I think that you brought up a really good point when you talked about the clusters. I talked about our sectors in focus, and as a smaller community or mid-sized community, several of those sectors, and I would point to tech and aerospace and manufacturing as on the verge of being a true cluster, but maybe not a true cluster yet. But when you look at investments at UBC in research and programs, as well as industry research and opportunities and investments and focus by government, you really have all the pieces together to create a cluster. And that is would be a benefit to retaining that talent here and communicating that. But before I go too off track, I think one of our biggest benefits as a region this size is having the presence of UBC and Okanagan College here. And not just having the institutions here, but having them here and having a focus on integrating with the community, working with industry. Ananya talked earlier about the various locations of UBC throughout the region, but I know UBC has such a strong focus on engaging with industry through programs like work integrated learning. And I think that we'll only see, and I hope we'll only see that continue to expand in the region, as well as research. Programs like MyTax. I know that when we talk to companies from outside the region who are interested in doing business in the region and perhaps setting up operations, we will often, if not most of the time, bring UBC and Okanagan College in on those conversations, because industry really likes to hear that story of industry relations and connection. And not only in training and research, but I think the other value that post-secondary institutions bring to our region, and it goes back to something that David talked about earlier with millennials and changing values, is that we know that people who move here want to live in a diverse community. They want to live in a community where there's public art and cultural opportunities. They want to live in a community that has positive relationships with the Indigenous people who are the stewards of the land in their ancestral territories. And I think that post-secondary institutions really have the opportunity and provide new ways of thinking and different ideas and bring that into the region to the benefit of everyone. So I think I don't know if I answered your question there. I got a little off track, so let me know if you have a follow-up.
There is wonderful sharing for that. So maybe I just might pop up a quick questions to all the panelists, and before I go to the last topics, and then so I prepare for today's panel discussions for that. So we are talking about opportunity, we are talking about like challenges. So maybe I just like kind of like moving forward kind of like in the post-pandemic, where it's come to my next topic now with that. So the pandemic forced the whole world pretty much like to take a break or to pause, but we have to move on for sure for that. And in BC for that, we pretty much like seeing September 7th this year would be our post-pandemic world start. And then so hopefully it will happen. But I wonder whether you can share your views about the future trends and also investment opportunity. David, you brought that up earlier, as well as the changing roles of governments or higher educations and foundations, and then the nonprofit center and the business center. And maybe start with Krista for that, so you can maybe add some points, and then so about the post-pandemic world, please.
Thank you. What we're seeing, and we certainly don't get into too much economic forecasting in our organization, but trends that we were seeing prior to the pandemic have been accelerated by the pandemic, whether that be the future of work and remote work, the adoption of technology by individuals as well as organizations, or maybe shifting values about the way that people want to live and where they want to live and where they have the opportunity to live. And these trends that have all been accelerated make the Okanagan's value proposition stronger than pre-pandemic. So I think opportunities for mid-size cities are very vast, particularly ones that have world-class post-secondary institutions, as well as international airports. And the Okanagan is one of the most amenity-rich areas in the province. So all that to say that our opportunities and the things that attracted people to the region prior are more true than they ever were before. And all that sounds great, but it certainly comes with its challenge. And what when we look to the future, the biggest challenge that we see at the Economic Development Commission is managing that growth, particularly when it comes to affordability, and doing that in a way that doesn't leave people behind who are not able to access things like safe housing, childcare. We know that women and particularly families with young children have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and it's going to be very difficult to bring those people back into the workforce without access to safe and affordable childcare. So all that to say is that managing growth is our next challenge.
Thank you, Krista, for that. So how about David, from the foundation perspective for that, and how you see the future of the post-pandemic world in the Okanagan region?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And Krista, I couldn't agree more. We can move much faster than we ever thought possible. Hey, it's whether it's fundraising or whether it's pivoting to adopt online technology. We saw our not-for-profit sector move so quickly and respond so amazingly to the emerging need, but also operationally what they needed to do to quickly change the way that they did business and provided the important products and services to their users. So it's amazing what came out of that, if anything, a silver lining, I suppose. In terms of the future, I think what we're seeing already, Eric, is a blurring of the lines between social enterprise, philanthropy, and the not-for-profit sector. I spend an awful lot of time talking to people outside of my sector, the not-for-profit sector, because there's so much partnership and there's so much collaboration opportunities, and we're figuring that out. I'll give you an example on how government and business and not-for-profit is working together. Last year, we as the member of the Community Foundations of Canada, there's 191 community foundations across Canada. So we're part of a very big network serving very local needs. And I think that created a great opportunity for us to roll out the investment readiness program very locally. Quickly, we were able to go together with our foundations in North and South Okanagan, and united as an Okanagan Valley. I think this is what's really important. We become an even more powerful voice, and we access more funding from the government because of the power of this place. And again, together we were able to achieve more funding, provide more investment readiness funding, both for the not-for-profit sector and social enterprise, so for-profit or B Corp, that were still solving the same problem. So it was a really exciting opportunity for us to see how quickly we could get funding into the hands of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial not-for-profits to start developing and capacity building or accessing expertise or looking for other partnership opportunities to develop their funding models more broadly. So I think that there's more to that. There's definitely more to that. And I'm looking forward to seeing how us as the foundation can support those conversations and further our collaboration as well. Eric.
Well, thank you, David, for that. So it's wonderful sharing for that. So you really touch on a lot of points for that. So maybe now I would like to invite Ananias for that. So maybe you speak on behalf of higher education institutions and also one of the top research intensive university globally. So how UBC, in particular UBC Okanagan campus, is seeing the post-pandemic world, and what opportunity and what challenges we might face. Please go ahead.
So one of the unexpected things was that, the demand for UBC degree stays strong. I think most universities have seen that, but we have seen the applications and the student interest in a whole set of programs be very strong. The concern is the affordability question that both David and Krista raised. Our students are coming, and we would like to welcome more and more students from different parts of the world. But the affordability of Kelowna and everything else is an issue. So as an institution, we are very seriously looking at the question of affordability. The opportunity that we see is, this blurring of the line between the local and the global. So this campus has a very distinctive opportunity to imagine the local, because we have very strong relationships with the local, to imagine the local in a global way, really think about the local and the global being in a dynamic relationship with one another. And some of the work that is happening in the Faculty of Management show that. But in other programs also, we've been thinking of whether we should build global e-campuses on certain topics where, people from different parts of the world can come together, what kind of new collaborations we can have. So that connection between the global and the local has become a lot more open because of technology. And, during the whole pandemic, when we were teaching online, we were offering courses in 18 time zones, right? But that happened almost overnight. We went from in-class instruction to a mode of instruction where we were teaching over 18 time zones. So what from that can be kept and systematized in a way that we have that constant local global dynamic, that is the opportunity. And in some ways, if we can, think of if there are models through which it could become more affordable for more students in different ways. One thing we've learned that, and it is a great tribute to our faculty, that students value the interaction with their faculty. So a totally online option with no opportunity to learn with the faculty, interact, and with their peers, that's not what students want. But there is a whole range of possibilities between different types of modalities. And that's a huge, that plus the global research collaboration, those are the opportunities that we can look at post-pandemic.
Thank you, Ananias, for that. It's a wonderful sharing for that. So you're definitely right for that. So we are operating pretty much like the online sessions for students all across the globe. And then so during the pandemic for that, it's really kind of opened up a lot of like new thinkings or ideas for, I think, for the future higher educations for that. So to some extent for that, just like thank you so much for all your sharing. And then so that's conclude more like the part one for today's and the panel discussions. And I know that the attendees, I'm pretty sure you're enjoying all the sharings from our three wonderful panelists for that. If you have any questions, and feel free to use now the Q&A function. So in our Zoom, so you can just like go to the bottom row of your screen for that, and feel free to share some questions, and Sherman and I will start moderating those Q&A. So while we are waiting for the first questions for that, so maybe I just like continuing, because Ananya, you talk about affordabilities. So housing affordabilities, I'm pretty sure it's not just like the Canadians or the Okanagan issue, but it seems like it's a very global issue, especially in part of the Asia. So where some of our attendees from for that. So in the past years, housing affordability have become a very important topic. And then so David and Krishna, do you want to share some of the insights on these topics? And maybe Ananya, you can join us as well. So maybe David, do you want to talk about the housing?
Sorry, you wanted me to talk about housing?
Yeah, the housing affordability for that. We talk about youth recruitment and retentions earlier for that. So do you kind of have any of these additional thoughts about the housing affordability? Is there key drivers, or is that a key challenge for keeping the talents?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer that question. I can relay a personal story about, you know, when we moved to the Okanagan in 2000, we bought our home for $185,000. I think the average home is now $850,000. It's mind-boggling to me how that happened. You know, obviously there's some growth expected, but you know, clearly it's a wonderful place to live. And we were very smart when we said, oh yeah, we'll move to Kelowna 21 years ago. I don't know if you know, if it's sustainable, if it's going to correct and adjust and make it you know, more accessible for more people. I know that in our foundation, we're working with some really innovative entrepreneurs and social impact professionals on more affordable housing models. I'm optimistic that those models will provide a really necessary you know, closing of the gap, if you like, to provide people at least a foothold, an important foothold within the market, that they can continue with to live here and work here and raise their families here in an affordable way. And then, you know, at least, you know, again, provide that opportunity to people. So, you know, our role in that is really, again, to bring people together, to make sure that we can support and close those gaps with ways that people can, you know, donate money to support affordable housing in this community. And those are that's new territory in some ways for a foundation, but in an important one, especially here, given the challenges we face.
Wonderful, David, for that. How about Krishna? Do you have anything you would like to add on the housing affordability?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really important topic for us, and it's one of our primary concerns going forward. We surveyed our advisory council, which is a 45-person cross-section of industry community partners, and when we were talking about workforce recruitment and what the biggest challenge was, housing affordability and accessibility was number one across the board. And I think that looking forward, we're going to have to look at this from multiple levels. So there's policy that needs to change from the local, provincial, federal levels and supports in that way. There's industry innovations and different ways that industry can look at housing. Everything from the construction development industry to other industries. We've talked to manufacturers, daycares, healthcare providers who are considering building worker housing. So that's very much on the radar for companies when it comes to attracting talent. And then I think there's innovative solutions that I'm sure we don't know about yet, but will come out of our bright students and researchers over the next couple of years. And one that, one that we can point to that already exists is Happy Pad. I think you'll hear from them in the roadshow tomorrow as well. But there's, I think, a lot of opportunity, but we have to look at it from multiple levels. And there's no simple or easy answer.
Wonderful. And on yours, I'm not sure, do you have any things you would like to add on?
Except that, as a university, we are really focusing on student housing and utilizing whatever government programs we can for student housing. We have 2 brand new residences opening on campus in July and August. And then the downtown project will also have residential housing. But what I think, we have actually a good core group of researchers in our School of Engineering around green construction and alternative housing. So it would be great to, again, bring together the housing researchers in the region to look at housing affordability in a multidisciplinary way. That would be a great project for us. And I think we could be leaders in that with the kind of partners that we have. Very much like to work on something like that.
Thank you, Ananias, for that. Sherman, you have Canberra, do you want to handle the next questions?
Sure, I think we already have some questions. So first off, thanks a lot for sharing and giving this insight about Okanagan Valley and what the region has to offer here. So we have a question from Deborah. So the question is, so many good community groups are working in the Okanagan. How do this intersect? For example, organizations like the Okanagan Foundation, the Central Okanagan Foundation, and Southern Interior Development and Innovation Trust. Is there a way to harness the various organizations in investing in the communities? So I think it's an open question, not directed to someone specific, so anyone can feel free to answer it.
It's probably a good question for me to answer. I'll jump in on that. I think that our friends at the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior have a very similar mandate to us, and in many ways we cross over, in some ways we don't, But I think as part of the overall ecosystem of funders, we absolutely talk regularly. Actually, Laurel and I are scheduled to meet in June to talk about this very thing. And Laurel is the CEO of the trust. And, not so long ago, actually very just before the pandemic, we convened a group of funders, philanthropists in a sharing way to figure out some of the larger problems and how we can focus our efforts more effectively, so that we're not working in silos. I don't necessarily think we are, but if there was a way that we could collaborate more closely, even just to connect, understand everybody's mandate, where we can operate, where we can cross over, and where we can double down, if you like, to solve some bigger systemic issues, then we should be doing that. So sadly, the pandemic has caused us to not meet in person, but certainly those conversations continue. And as I mentioned in my last section, with this collaboration between the social enterprise, the government money, not-for-profit sector, and the community foundation movement, there's a lot of power in those relationships and connections, and that would include a group like the community foundations, but also the trust of the Southern Interior. So I think there's lots more opportunity to come there.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for the sharing, David. Professor Eric, over to you.
maybe Krista, do you have any things you would like to add?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with what David just mentioned, and particularly with the I think was mentioned earlier, the blurring of the lines between what's the role of a nonprofit, what's the role of academia, what's the role of government, and what's the role of industry. I think all of those components combined with the entrepreneurial spirit that we have in the region can tackle a lot of these problems. And I think that one of the strengths of the region is that collaboration that already exists. So there's many groups that meet regularly. I referenced our advisory council earlier, which is made up of 45 people, which is a little bit of a scary thought when it comes to planning and moderating those meetings. But it's composed of elected officials from the communities that we serve, including West Bank First Nation, municipal staff, community partners, and industry leaders, and meets monthly to talk about these type of issues. And I think that the best way to move forward is to continue to have those conversations and expand them. And so I think we're on to a good thing with collaboration in the community, and I think there's lots of opportunities to do even better.
Thank you, Krista, for that. About 9 years, but I think that UBC is also playing a very important role as well.
Did you have a question, Eric? I couldn't hear you well.
No, I think it's just like following up the same questions, and then so maybe having multiple partners is doing all great thing for that.
Yeah.
So how do you see the UBC role in this conversation?
So on the housing question, I think, the case is ripe for having a kind of multidisciplinary table to look at, the demographics, where the housing gap is the highest, and see, what kind of solutions can be brought forward for that. As I said, there is a group in our School of Engineering which can look at that, and then other kinds of analysts that, if required, we can find between the two campuses to talk about housing. I mean, it's a much bigger question in Vancouver, but still, the main issues in terms of, the demographics and the different kind of populations experiencing the housing crisis in very specific ways, that could be a very good topic of research to get research collaboration.
That's great. Thank you, Ananias, for that. Okay, well, we do have another questions from patients for that. So he said it's very good discussions, a number of important issues and challenges like homelessness and hunger having been hinted on. I'm curious if your organizations might be deliberating some permanent solutions to some of these challenges, or at least more permanent solutions, as it is very common for most nonprofit organizations to nurse these issues which exist in society and cities. It's a big question. Again, who would like to take on these questions first?
So I can say from the UBC perspective, as I said, that the whole question of affordability is being looked at the system level, both campuses, and I'm co-chairing a task force on affordability at UBC. It's focused on students, but the issues are the same: the the housing price, food, and living expenses, and so on. So I think that this exercise will bring forward certain challenges of a particular demographics in the two cities, in Vancouver and in Okanagan. And then from that, I'm sure that we could, it will draw some general discussions as well, but we could, tune, if we want to hone in on particular questions with particular partners, we can do that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Ananias. Maybe David, do you want to add some comments from the foundations and nonprofits perspective?
This is in response to Patience's question?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, Patience. I'm not sure if I necessarily can agree with you fully, but let's just take it as in a more global viewpoint. I think that, in terms of homelessness and hunger and seeing these big systemic issues, as a community foundation, we don't deal with them directly, but rather indirectly. But on the other hand, I think that as a person, I feel personally connected to wanting to live in a community that does not have anybody experience hunger or homelessness. So I put it back to me, to the donors, to our board, to our committees, to everybody to say, okay, if this is not okay, what opportunities do I have as an individual to direct some of my funding or some of my philanthropy to an organization that is making a difference? And I can help with that to direct, individuals to participate either actively or passively, actively in terms of volunteering and funding, or passively in terms of funding, to again participate in that narrative and participate in actively changing it. I think whenever we look outside of ourselves to try and solve an issue, we're only doing half the work. And I think that if we are truly honest with ourselves and we feel that this is something that should be eradicated from our society, that it's up to, we have to ask ourselves, what are we prepared to do about it?
Yeah, thank you, David, for your sharings. How about Krista?
I don't have much to share beyond what's already been shared, but certainly major issues with no easy solutions. So both of the other panelists, pointed to that we need an approach that's multidisciplinary, but also involves ourselves as people and policy and a variety of different disciplines. The Regional District of Central Okanagan, which the Economic Development Commission is a service of, which is our regional government, is currently working with United Way on a Central Okanagan poverty and wellness strategy. So hopefully we can address some of those issues through that. And I'm sure that there will be outreach with all these various groups to do that. And I wish that I had an easy answer, but I'm afraid that there are none.
Well, thank you so much, Krista, for that. So, Sherman, do you want to take care of the next question?
Sure. So we have another question from Christy. We have a question from Christy. So the question is, do you have any suggestions about how community service providers can anticipate or predict the impacts of an increasing population to stay ahead of demand?
I can start there. I think that's a fantastic question. I saw a discouraging post on social media recently about the census and people who were reluctant to fill it in because they were felt that it was intrusive. And that just goes right down to, breaks my economic development heart, because we rely on this data and information to make evidence-based decisions about the programs that we as local, provincial, federal governments are able to support in our region. So this is something that if you talk to anyone on my team for long enough, it will certainly come up, which is the lack of available data for our region. So we're always advocating for more access to data at a regional level. And so that doesn't really answer your question, but I think that is something that all of us in government and community service providers are focused on these days is making evidence-based decisions and looking at the data. So there is much available. And I think that we can likely, as maybe alluded to earlier when talking about a multidisciplinary research project in housing, is we may be able to leverage our institutions. For example, I know that UBC Okanagan has access to a Stats Canada data center that I think that community partners could probably do a better job of figuring out how we can access that information and access the talents of researchers to make those predictions and decisions.
Great. Maybe
I can answer it in a different way. In terms of what kind of community service professionals we need in order to keep a pace with the growth. One of the aspects of the Outlook 2040 vision that this campus has is about professional learning, or what we call lifelong learning. And the way we define lifelong learning in that document was that a university never closing doors to somebody who wants to learn, right? And during the pandemic, we have seen that this has become a lot truer for a lot of people who now would like to take advantage of technology, or have been either have lost their jobs or expect to be losing jobs, and there is a possibility of training. We recently launched 2 programs, which we call under the government's micro-credential program. We launched 2, and they are quite successful, and we are hoping to launch more. And that whole kind of micro-credential, lifelong learning, non-credit, professional-based learning is a big part of the university's future vision, specifically to serve the regional needs of professions that as they arise.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for that. How about David?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect segue into this partnership discussion, isn't it? I mean, Krista, from the data standpoint, to provide not-for-profits in our sector access to amazing data that they wouldn't either have the means or the connection to, or the access to in an easy way or manageable way. If we could solve that, I think we'd be really onto something for the entire sector. But it leads me to something that as a community foundation we used to be very involved in years ago, and some of our community foundations across Canada publish a report called Vital Signs, which is really just a bringing together of some of the key issues within a very small, reasonably small area, whether it's the central Okanagan or the greater Okanagan Valley. We think about this as an important document and an important study. And well, I'm glad everybody's on the call now, because I'm looking for partners, and who's in. I think it would be a wonderful way for the community to rally the community together and say, okay, let's see what we can create, and in so doing, bring the community together to focus on some of the big systemic issues, and then ask the question, what are we prepared to do about it? So there it is. There's the ask.
So you're looking for collaboration to produce the Vital Signs report.
Yeah, we're thinking about it, and I think that in the past we've kept it. It's been a community foundation mainstay. It's in across the country. It's we're sort of renowned for the Vital Signs report from the community foundation. But I think of it as also the opportunity to capture either the broader Okanagan, or if we just did the central Okanagan, who else would benefit from having this information and be part of that journey. And certainly the folks that are on my screen right now, I think the university and the Economic Development Commission. There's a bunch of other folks, the tech community, who might be interested in this. The financial institutions, you name it. So we've talked about government, for business, for profit, not for profit. There might be some opportunities there.
Yeah, and within the university, not to put anybody on the spot, but we have the Socio-Economic Change Lab, which Eric and Roger are connected to. I cannot think of a better host to do something like be involved in something like a Vital Signs report. I'm not committing anybody to anything, but it just seems like such a fantastic collaboration to launch.
Get out there.
We'd love to talk about it as well.
Fantastic.
If I could add something to that I was thinking about that previous question, is we talk a lot about data, but another thing that the Economic Development Commission does, and is a big bulk of our work, is listening. So our team of 3 people meets with over 200 businesses for 1 hour plus site visits, where we go in and we find out a lot about what they're doing. We also meet with over 500 businesses each year in more of a quick hit way through our Business Walks program. And sometimes we get little undercurrents that we might hear this year, and we keep our ears open. And if we hear more of those, it's not really, robust data, but it's just listening to the community and listening to those undercurrents. And if you start to hear them more, then maybe there's something there. So I think it's really important to marry that data with listening to people in the community that you're serving. That would be my other point.
That's wonderful for that. Well, I'm just thinking about the time for that we are closing to the end of our panel discussions for that. Again, thank you. But I do have one question. Again, it's just like really kind of like, I think our community is really thinking about that questions especially for a long time, especially in the last few days for that. So about how to build an inclusive community, especially our relationship with the Indigenous First Nations community here. And then, so when we talk about pandemic, so it's not just like talk about like the public health issue, but we also witnessing a lot of like social movements and across the world. And then, so I'm just wondering, just like, what would be your opinions for emerging regions like the Okanagan? So we are small or medium-sized region in Canadian standards for that, but we are very much like facing the same types of issues when we talk about systematic racism. We are talking about relationship with the Indigenous community. We are talking about like our dreams to create a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable community for that. So it's all talking about collaborations, but I just want to invite the panelists for that maybe having some final words on this issue and for our attendees today. And I don't know who want to start, but then maybe Ananias, you want to start?
Sure. So, for the campus is growing in diversity quite remarkably. There's a lot more to do, and it's a constant work needed to be done by everyone all the time. But we have made some beginnings in terms of, we have a public forum on systemic racism, which talks about these issues in a fairly broad way. And we've had, again, because of the pandemic, a lot of participation from different parts of the world even. And we've been able to really bring Indigenous voices, Black voices, people of color from different parts of the world on particular issues. And I think we should continue to do that. But perhaps what I was thinking for the next phase of that public forum, maybe do it with partners like you are doing here, that on particular issues of inclusion or challenges to inclusion, work with particular partners to see, what we could do, whether it's housing, whether it is access, whether it is, disability-related issues. There is a lot that can be done in a public forum. Even I found that, the voices which felt like there wasn't anybody to hear, the public forum has legitimated a lot of those experiences and helped people articulate them. I think that's a very important role that the university needs to play. And we can again do it through specific collaborations.
Thank you, Ananias, for that. How about Krista?
Yes, certainly. So all of this is a very important issue for us at the Economic Development Commission, and we have a lot of work to do. But the phase, as I was mentioning earlier about listening, I think really goes back to anti-racism, Indigenous inclusion, diversity inclusion in our community, is listening to those voices and looking at the tables that we're sitting at and making sure that there's voices, different voices and a diversity of voices and views that are being shared that maybe previously haven't been. So that's certainly a priority of ours going forward. Would love to connect and learn further about how we can further support.
Well, thank you, Krista, for that. David, please.
To echo those comments, it's a hugely important piece that we need to continue to work towards, and it is a journey. We need to work on listening and understanding and making sure that, certainly our board and our governance model of our board and committees that is reflective of the community that we serve and the country that we live in and the global community at large, and that we do that because it's the right, not only the important to do it, the right thing to do, but it makes us stronger. It makes us more relevant. It makes us more impactful. And these things are so important. And we'll continue to do that in our grants committees and our governance and our board and staff and all through, so that we have a greater level of understanding and compassion, and ultimately we can increase the level of impact that we have in the community we serve.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a very important topic, and we do want to build better communities, and I think it really requires we work together to build that momentum, and really going back to today's topics if we want to make changes. But again, thank you so much for three wonderful panelists and joining us today to really sharing a lot of your insights and also your views about how to build a better community. So now.